Hey folks, welcome back to Only Best Fancy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about the latest Black Company novel by Glen, Lies Weeping. And ultimately, this proved to be a boring installment in the series, but one with a whole lot of caveats attached to that final statement. Because first and foremost, the reason why it is boring is because it is very much a setup novel. But anyway, let's get into it. So, what is this book even about? The first thing to note is that it's the first of a new quartet, A Pitiless Reign, and it picks up after the events of Soldiers Live. We find the latest iteration of the Black Company dealing with the ramifications of those events, and also coming to terms with their new positions, their new their new the new the way their lives are now structured, you can see. In addition to that, we find the Black Company as a whole itself in a familiar land, but a bit adrift, and having to figure out a way to try to having to figure out a way to move forward. On top of that, we do have the inklings of a new mystery stirring, and the that begin to stir over the course of this novel. Even as we have a character who has appeared in the past, begin to give us quite a bit of backstory to past events that have some pretty significant ramifications. Um, well, if not significant ramifications, at least in terms of the lore, we're getting quite a bit of a lower drop with this one. So that's kind of everything that goes on in Lies Weeping in a nutshell. Let's unpack all of it and why I say this book is ultimately boring, even though it has quite a lot going on that I liked. So first and foremost, the characters. This book, more than any other book, convinced me of how good a character writer Glen Cook is, because we have two analysts in this outing who the POV shifts between for the most part, um, along with another character who comprises a third POV. And with the two analysts in particular, these are two teenage girls, and Glen Cook does just such a good job of giving them personalities that really come across in the page, and really creating characters that I really liked. When I think of their personalities and just their interaction and the relationships that they have and these kind of things, like they're fun people. They're fun people to read their thoughts, we should say. Now, the backlash with that is that because of the position that we find the Black Company in this particular novel, they there's not it creates a problem with the way with the story that the analysts have to tell, and this is something that's acknowledged by them in their writings. Like, you, if there's not much going on, you can't report on much, and that's kind of what happens with them. So what happens with them is we tend to focus more on the drama as a result of that. The relationships between each other, the certain other characters who have major roles or who will have major roles, and also new characters, old characters, that kind of thing. We spend quite a bit of drama on them, and because of the fact that we have these two POVs that we rotate between, it can get a bit repetitive. It can get a bit repetitive, and it can get as a result of that, it was a bit boring because it compounds on top of the fact that for the majority of this book, there's not much there's not much significant progression where it comes to the Black Company as a unit, because we do very much find the Black Company in a stage of its existence where it where it needs to chart its next course, and that's what a large swath of this novel is spent on, um, basically, with the Black Company kind of figuring out where to go next. Um, so there's that. The other thing that kind of contributed to the boredom is the third POV that I mentioned, where we begin to get some lore. Now, some of it is interesting. Most of it is alternate viewpoint, and I put an asterisk next to that alternate viewpoint of the events of Port of Shadows. So if you read these books in publication order, you would have read Port of Shadows right before this book. And as a result of that, quite a lot of what you just read, you're re-experiencing in this novel. It is recapped because it does have ramifications. Like the events of Port of Shadows, it does have ramifications for what happens with one particular character in here. It's going to be very interesting to see how that particular thread proceeds in the upcoming books. But it's another case of the repetition that really that really contributed to the boredom, to like that feeling of boredom in this book, because like it didn't really bring anything new to the table. It didn't really bring anything different to the table. We kind of recovered material that we would have just covered in Port of Shadows, and it does cement the reading order for this for these books actually. I still believe Port of Shadows should be read after Soldiers Live, and definitely then this one. So publication order is the way you want to go, basically. So that's kind of it for the characters. Overall, we have interesting new cast of characters. We have some much needed changes that had to happen with them. And we have characters overall just taking some interesting new directions. Personally, given I like the characters of the analysts, I'm hoping that as the story really begins to ramp up, they really just amplify my enjoyment of the series as a whole. So there's that. When it comes to the actual plot of this story, like I said, it's largely split between two major threads. One is the Black Company trying to figure out a way forward and just dealing with the logistics of day-to-day life. Like it's been said multiple times over the course of this series, one of the unfortunate aspects of soldiering life is that you spend a lot of time sitting around being bored, and that's kind of where we find the Black Company for the majority of this novel. Then we do have the other thread where we begin to dive into the past, and that has some larger, that has larger ramifications, more on the epic scale, that will be interesting to see how they develop. Aside from that, we do begin to get teasers of some new mysteries that hopefully escalate in the next book and really amplify and really kick things into gear when it comes to this new sub-series of the Black Company. That being said, the book, even though for a large swath of it, it just feels like wheels being spun, it does really ramp up towards the end, and it does have a bit of a cliffhanger ending. So, like where we left off, it is going to be very interesting to see what comes next. So yeah, be warned about that. But like overall, it's a reading experience I'm very ambivalent on. When I think on it, for large parts of this book, I was just bored. There are moments when the analysts in particular, really shine that really saved this book for me. I have to say. Otherwise, I would have just called it a really bad book. And it's going to be interesting to see what the response to this book is, because given the backlash that Port of Shadows got, I'm very curious to see how people react to this one. So yeah, a boring experience, but one with purpose, because it's clearly a setup novel. It's clearly there just to establish a new status quo and to begin and to lay the groundwork for what comes next with the Black Company. It doesn't, but it as a standalone story, it doesn't. It's not much of a standalone. So, yeah. Honestly, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about Lies Weeping. It did make me very interested to see what's going to happen in the next book, especially after we got that as usual, Glen Cook with his amazing quotes. We got the quote that kind of teases what the next book is probably going to entail. So yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Light Sweeping. If you made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.